Sarah, an overweight woman, stepped onto the plane, gripping her ticket tightly, doing her best to ignore the fleeting glances around her. She didn't want attention. She didn't want judgment. She just wanted to get home. But the moment she set foot inside the aircraft, an unsettling feeling crept over her. The flight attendant's eyes swept over her, head to toe, her forced smile doing little to mask the silent scrutiny behind it. This wasn't politeness. It was an assessment, a veiled judgment disguised as professionalism. Passengers nearby noticed, but as if on cue, quickly looked away. The awkward silence in the cabin felt thick, suffocating, pressing against her like the recycled air of the plane. What Sarah didn't know was that someone on that flight was watching, someone who saw everything, and that someone happened to be one of the most famous actors in Hollywood. But what he did after hearing those comments, it will leave you breathless. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow we have another unforgettable tale waiting for you. Los Angeles International Airport was its usual chaotic mix, voices overlapping, suitcases rolling, flight announcements crackling over the speakers. But Sarah barely noticed any of it. Her attention was locked on her phone screen, fingers scrolling frantically, searching for an update that hadn't come. Unread message from the vet. Her chest tightened. Toby, her elderly beagle, was sick, very sick. The vet had promised to send the final test results before her flight, but so far nothing. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to push down the rising dread. Her eyes flickered over the sea of travelers around her. Airports weren't new to her. She had traveled alone plenty of times. But lately something felt different. The stares were different. They weren't the casual glances of curiosity or absent-minded distraction. These held something heavier, something sharper, judgment. She knew why. Her body had never fit the mold the world expected. She wasn't small. She wasn't delicate. She didn't hide behind neutral colors or shapeless fabrics. She took up space, and that made people uncomfortable. Today she wore a pink t-shirt with bold white lettering, peace, love, and dogs. She loved the phrase. But she also knew deep down that people didn't associate those words with someone who looked like her. Still, she refused to shrink herself to make them comfortable. A soft beep snapped her back to reality. Her phone vibrated. The test results aren't good, Sarah. We need to talk as soon as possible. Soon, her stomach twisted. A lump formed in her throat. She had known even before this message that something was wrong. The moment Toby stopped eating, she felt it. But seeing it in black and white? Cold, definitive. It made everything real. She swallowed hard, forcing her emotions down. There were long hours of flying ahead. She couldn't break down now, not here, not in front of strangers already watching her for no reason. And that's when she heard it, a calm male voice beside her. That's a philosophy I live by too. Sarah looked up. A tall man stood there, dressed simply, his face unshaven, hair tousled. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at her shirt. His subtle smile wasn't mocking, wasn't condescending, just genuine. For a brief moment, the weight she carried lifted. It seems like a good motto, right? She replied, offering a hesitant smile. He nodded as if about to say more. But before he could, Sarah's phone vibrated again. Her heart pounded. Maybe it was an update about Toby. She quickly glanced down. Just a flight reminder. When she looked up again, he was gone, swallowed by the moving crowd. Sweet! Sarah exhaled deeply. Something about that moment unsettled her, but she pushed the thought aside. She took a step forward in the boarding line and felt it again, that eerie chill running down her spine. Someone was staring at her. A flight attendant, slim, impeccably groomed. Her hair pulled into a severe bun, uniform perfectly pressed, but it wasn't her flawless appearance that caught Sarah's attention. It was her eyes, cold, calculating, a look that said everything without saying a single word. Disdain, not the vague, indifferent kind, as if Sarah had been mildly inconvenient. No, this was specific. This was the kind of stare that said, you don't belong here, and Sarah knew exactly why. Her heartbeat quickened at all too familiar tightness forming in her chest, that silent, unspoken humiliation. That expectation, the expectation that she should feel guilty just for existing in this space. She refused to look away. She had been through this before. And she knew. She knew this trip wasn't going to be easy. The flight attendant blinked slowly, as if already predicting that Sarah would be a problem. Her gaze swept over Sarah's body, one last judgmental scan before she turned and walked away. Sarah clenched her fists. This was just the beginning. She adjusted the strap of her bag over her shoulder and stepped onto the plane. She felt them again. The stares, the discomfort, the barely concealed expressions of the seated passengers. Some turned their heads quickly, pretending not to notice. Others didn't even bother to hide it. They looked at her, really looked, scanning her as if her presence here was some kind of mistake. She knew what they were thinking. How does someone like that end up on this flight? Sarah ignored it. It wasn't the first time. She just needed to find her seat and get through the flight. The sooner she settled in, the better. But then, a voice. Sweet, too sweet. Oh, sweetheart, is this really your seat? Sarah froze. In the middle of the aisle, it was her. The flight attendant from before, the same woman who had stared her down at the gate. Sarah's grip tightened around her bag as she glanced up, and what happened next would change everything. Sarah glanced down at the boarding pass in her hand. 22B. Yes, this was her seat. She knew that, but the way the flight attendant spoke made it sound like she didn't belong. Taking a steady breath, she lifted her eyes. The woman in front of her wore a small, artificial smile, one that didn't quite reach the coldness in her gaze. She clutched a tablet, pretending to check something, but Sarah could tell. Her focus was entirely on her. Yes, 22B. Sarah kept her voice firm as it do. The flight attendant didn't flinch. Her smile stayed in place, but something flickered in her eyes, something Sarah recognized instantly. Satisfaction. She wanted to humiliate her. A heavy silence settled over the nearby passengers. No one spoke, but Sarah could feel the weight of their attention. Everyone was waiting, pretending not to look, but watching nonetheless. Forcing a polite smile, she took a step forward, ready to sit. The flight attendant didn't move. If you need more space, I can try to find a more appropriate seat. She let the words dangle in the air before adding, almost as an afterthought. But of course, that comes at a cost. Sarah's face burned. This wasn't kindness. It was an insult wrapped in feigned politeness. She knew exactly what the woman meant. You don't fit. You don't belong here. Her stomach twisted, a retort on the tip of her tongue. But before she could say a word, she caught a glimpse of movement beside her. A man was passing through the aisle. The same man from earlier. The one who had commented on her shirt. He didn't stop, didn't say a word. But his eyes flickered toward the flight attendant for the briefest second, almost imperceptible. Then he kept walking, disappearing into first class. Sarah exhaled slowly, centering herself. She wouldn't give this woman the satisfaction of seeing her falter. I'm fine with my seat, thank you. Without waiting for a response, she stepped past the flight attendant and moved toward her seat. But before she could sit, she noticed something that made her chest tighten. The flight attendant wasn't the only one who had been listening. The passenger seated beside her, a middle-aged man with sharp features, looked at her, discomfort flashing across his face. Then, without a word, he stood and switched seats. Sarah swallowed hard. A knot formed in her throat. She wasn't going to shrink. Not for that. Still, a cold, certain thought settled in her mind. This was far from over. Sarah tried to steady her breathing as she settled into her seat. She wouldn't let them see how much it had affected her. The man now seated beside her, a graying gentleman with glasses, shifted slightly as if debating whether to say something, but he didn't move away. A small victory. She reached for her carry-on bag and stood, trying to stow it in the overhead compartment. The space was tight. The bag was heavy. She tried once. No luck. Tried again, adjusted the angle. It slid in halfway but stuck. Her face grew warm. She hated this feeling. Before she could try again, a shadow moved beside her. Need some help? She turned. It was the man beside her. His tone was casual. No judgment. Just a simple offer. Sarah exhaled, her shoulders relaxing just a little. Yes, thank you. He stood, helping her adjust the bag, making sure it fit. But just as they were about to finish, a voice cut through the moment, sharp as a blade. Let's just hope the compartment holds up. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Sarah stiffened. The flight attendant stood just a few steps away, arms crossed, that same barely there smirk curving her lips. She had said it casually, as if it were nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Everyone knew it. Sarah felt her stomach churn. Her seatmate froze, still holding the bag. His jaw tightened. No one said anything, but everyone had heard. Without a word, the man beside her gave the bag one final push until it clicked into place. There. His voice was measured, stiff. Sarah forced herself to sit down, her muscles tense. She wouldn't let this break. The flight attendant didn't say another word, just cast her one last look of disdain before walking away. Her seatmate sighed and pulled a book from the seat pocket. Sarah noticed him part his lips as if about to say something, but then he stopped. He didn't need to say anything. His actions had already spoken loud enough. Still, deep down, Sarah knew this wasn't over. She glanced toward the aisle. The flight attendant was speaking to another crew member, and then she smiled. Small, dangerous. Sarah felt a chill crawl down her spine. This was far from over. She tried to focus, kept her gaze locked on the seat back in front of her, forced herself to ignore everything happening around her. But it wasn't easy. The plane was still boarding. Passengers shuffled down the aisle. Luggage was stowed. Voices blended into a steady hum. Yet beneath all of that, beneath the normal background chaos of travel, there was another kind of silence. A thick, loaded silence. Sarah felt it. Everyone felt it. The flight attendant no longer looked at Sarah directly, but her presence lingered like a thorn under the skin. She moved through the aisle, flashing polite smiles at some passengers while casting scrutinizing glances at others. Then came the next blow. Sarah noticed it the second it happened. A well-dressed businessman approached her row. He glanced at his boarding pass, then at her, and then hesitated. A breath, a flicker of something in his expression before he finally sat down beside her. It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't distraction. It was discomfort. Sarah clenched her jaw and looked away, ignored it. Or at least she tried. But moments later, the flight attendant reappeared, stopping beside their row, wearing that smile, the fake one. "The gentleman next to you might want a bit more space," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Then, as if to soften the blow, she added, "But let's see how the flight goes, shall we?" Silence. Sarah's stomach twisted. She knew this was far from over. Everything inside Sarah screamed that she shouldn't cry. Not now. Not in front of everyone. Not in front of him. Her throat felt tight, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. But when she looked at Keanu Reeves, really looked at him, she saw something unexpected. Not pity. Not discomfort. Just steady, unwavering respect. Sarah swallowed hard and forced herself to nod. "I'm fine." Keanu's eyes stayed on her for a moment longer, as if assessing whether she truly meant it. Then slowly, he turned back to the flight attendant. She had stepped back, gripping the tray with rigid fingers. Her face was a mask of barely concealed panic. This is a misunderstanding," she tried again, her voice wavering. Keanu raised an eyebrow. "A misunderstanding." His tone was calm, but something about it made the tension in the cabin snap even tighter. Passengers were no longer pretending to ignore what was happening. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others openly watched, eyes darting between the flight attendant and Keanu. But the young woman in the aisle seat let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. We all saw what happened. It wasn't a misunderstanding. A murmur rippled through the rows. Quiet agreement. The flight attendant's fingers tightened around the tray, her fake smile faltering. "Sir, if you have a complaint, you can take it up with customer service after the flight." Keanu didn't move, didn't blink. "No, we'll deal with it now." Silence. The flight attendant's breathing hitched. She wasn't just dealing with any passenger anymore. Sarah could practically hear her thoughts. "Not him, not here, not like this." Then from the front of the cabin, another voice broke through. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" Heads turned as another flight attendant, a senior crew member, judging by his uniform, approached. His eyes flickered between Keanu and the now visibly shaking woman beside him. Keanu took a slow breath, then gestured towards Sarah without breaking eye contact with the senior attendant. "Your crew member here has been harassing this passenger since boarding," making comments encouraging others to treat her poorly, and now he motioned toward the untouched tray. "This stunt." The older attendant's expression darkened. "Is that true?" He turned to the woman. She shook her head quickly. "I was only trying to be accommodating." Keanu let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Right, because publicly humiliating someone is considered accommodating now." The senior attendant's jaw tightened. Sarah could feel the energy shift. The flight attendant was losing control. More whispers spread among the passengers. People glanced between themselves, nodding, murmuring. Then the businessman who had been sitting beside Sarah, the one who had initially hesitated to take his seat, spoke up. "I don't usually get involved in things like this, but I saw it, too." A few rows down, another voice chimed in. "Me too." And then another, and another. Sarah's breath hitched. They had all seen. She had never expected them to say anything, but now they were. The flight attendant's face had gone from pale to bright red. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The senior attendant exhaled sharply and turned to her. "We'll be discussing this further after landing. For now, return to your station." The woman opened her mouth, maybe to argue, but one glance at Keanu, at the passenger still watching, and she seemed to think better of it. Without another word, she turned sharply and stalked toward the galley, tray still in hand. The tension in the air didn't vanish completely, but it shifted. It was no longer aimed at Sarah. It was aimed at her. The senior attendant gave a tight nod to Keanu, then Sarah. "I'm sorry for the trouble. Please enjoy the rest of your flight." And then just like that, he walked away. A beat of silence, then a single clap. Sarah turned, startled. The young woman beside her grinned, clapping again. Then another person joined, then another. A small, quiet ripple of applause spread through the cabin. Not loud, not exaggerated, but enough. Sarah let out a breath. She hadn't realized she was holding. Keanu turned back to her. This time his expression softened. "You okay?" She nodded. This time she meant it. Keanu gave her a small smile, then patted her arm lightly before stepping back toward first class. As he disappeared down the aisle, Sarah finally let herself exhale. She wasn't sure what she had expected when she boarded this plane. But Keanu Reeves standing up for her in front of a full flight, that hadn't even been a possibility in her wildest imagination. And yet, here she was. For the first time since takeoff, Sarah allowed herself a small, real, Because for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She shouldn't get emotional here, but something cracked. She swallowed hard and nodded. "I'm fine." It wasn't entirely true, but at that moment, it was the best she could say. Keanu studied her for a moment, as if he knew there was more behind her words, but he didn't push. He turned back to the flight attendant, and that was the moment the entire plane shifted. The whispers began. Passengers murmured. Phones discreetly lifted, cameras beginning to record. The businessman next to Sarah adjusted his glasses. The young woman in the aisle seat watched with wide eyes. Other passengers exchanged knowing glances. Something was happening, and Sarah knew there was no more ignoring it. The flight attendant saw the cameras and seemed to realize too late that the situation was slipping out of her control. Her forced smile vanished. "Mr. Reeves, Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Oh, so now you recognize me." The flight attendant's face turned even redder. Sarah felt an adrenaline rush through her body. Keanu was exposing everything, and the crew knew it. At the front of the cabin, another flight attendant who had previously only been watching now looked nervous. He said something into his headset. Sarah didn't know what it was, but she knew that the entire plane was about to witness what happened next. Keanu took a deep breath, then smirked slightly. "I think there's been a mistake with the seating arrangement." He looked at Sarah. I believe my seat is next to hers." The flight attendant held her breath. Sarah's eyes widened. The entire plane froze, and then chaos erupted. The flight attendant seemed to swallow hard, her face still flushed with anger and discomfort. "Sir, that's not necessary." But Keanu remained calm and unwavering. "Actually, I think it is. He looked directly at Sarah, then back at the flight attendant. "I'd prefer that we switch seats." The silence deepened. It was a public statement. And more than that, it was an exposure. The flight attendant looked around, as if searching for support from a crew member. But no one spoke up. The passengers were watching closely, their phones raised, recording everything. She was cornered. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She looked at Keanu, trying to understand. He didn't have to do this. Not at all, but he was doing it. And deep down, she knew this wasn't just about a seat. It was about everything. About respect, about dignity, about not letting humiliation go unnoticed. The flight attendant tried to regain control of the situation. "Sir, first class has its rules and procedures." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "And do any of those procedures include discriminating against passengers?" The entire plane heard it. The flight attendant was speechless. Keanu then stood up. He grabbed his backpack calmly and looked at Sarah with a small smile. "The seat is all yours." Sarah felt her chest tighten. She wanted to refuse. She wanted to say she didn't need it. But she did. Not just for the comfort, but for what it represented. "Thank you." Her voice came out quieter than she intended. Keanu just nodded. Sarah stood up, and for the first time on this trip, she felt in control. She walked down the aisle. Passengers smiled at her discreetly. She was no longer invisible, no longer being ignored. When she finally reached first class, the flight attendants there were kind. No looks of disdain, no venomous remarks, just a polite nod and a warm smile. Sarah settled into the spacious seat. The soft fabric against her skin was a stark contrast to everything she had felt until now. She looked forward, saw Keanu settling into her old seat, completely at ease. He picked up a book as if nothing had happened. But Sarah knew something had happened, and soon the whole world would know too. At the back of the plane, someone was posting a video on Twitter. Keanu Reeves swapped seats with a passenger after she was humiliated on a flight. Sarah didn't know it yet, but in just a few hours, the entire world would know what had happened. Hours later, when the plane landed and passengers began to disembark, Sarah felt the impact before she even checked her phone. People looked at her differently now, not with judgment, but with curiosity. At the arrival gate, a small group of passengers gathered around their phones, laughing and animatedly discussing something. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. She unlocked her phone, and there it was, the video. Someone had filmed everything. The flight attendant, the cruel remarks, the exact moment Keanu stepped in and switched seats with her. Sarah felt her hands tremble. She had never wanted attention. She had never wanted her pain to be exposed like this. But at the same time, she had never felt so seen. And then the official response arrived. Official statement from the airline. After an internal investigation into the incident involving discrimination against a passenger, we confirm the termination of the employee involved. We reaffirm our commitment to treating all customers with respect and dignity. The flight attendant had been fired, and Sarah, she was still trying to understand how her personal experience had turned into a global conversation about respect and empathy. But out of all the messages she received, one impacted her the most. A notification appeared on her screen. Hope you're doing well. Keep spreading peace, love, and dogs around the world. Sarah smiled. She looked at the bustling airport ahead of her, grabbed her suitcase, and moved forward. Because on that day, something changed, not just in the world, but inside her.